So, a Texas woman has been arrested for allegedly trying to purchase a child. Hold up, wait, what? A child at Walmart for $500,000 because she wanted him. Now, I don't know if it's just me that feels this way, but I think if it was my parents and I was a child, or even if I was, right now, I'd probably sold for that $500,000 because, god damn it, like that's a lot of money. Even when you think about it any which way, that is actually a lot of money. That's $500,000 US. In Kenya shillings, if I remove a bunch of variations here and there, that's about 55 million. And let's be very honest, 55 million is quite a bit of money. Ask anyone. Even billionaires think $500,000 US is a lot. And to think that this woman felt like this was the worth of the kid, considering that a lot of us have a net worth of closer to zero or sometimes even a minus, this seems like a pretty good bargain when you think about it. Because if she was to recoup her investment, considering that this is in some way an investment, as most kids sort of are, then it would take her roughly about 25 to 30 years. Now, that's hoping that the kid doesn't get knocked down by a car, doesn't catch a disease and die, doesn't, fall off the rails or some shit, and actually does shit the way she wants and performs very, very well. And, has access to multiple good opportunities and is very, very lucky. Because in a lot of cases, in as much as kids can be looked at as an investment, they usually don't pay off all that well. Like hell, there's some kids that end up becoming super successful but end up becoming super rude to their parents and don't give back. And yes, I know it's bad, but I'm just mentioning that they exist. So in one way or another, they don't count that well as an investment. But $500,000, you can do quite a lot with $500,000. Although, that said, I do understand that, life is priceless and children are priceless as well, and I do not support, condone, or tolerate the trafficking of children and or other people. I do not support, condone, or tolerate human trafficking as well. But that said, I will state that maybe this woman wasn't one of the educated types, and maybe she just had access to money, and she didn't have access to, a biology textbook or, science knowledge and shit. And maybe because her parents told her when she asked where babies come from, they said the supermarket, she decided to go and get a baby from the supermarket. Like maybe that's something that she might have actually done. Like maybe she was doing that because that's how she knows babies come. Like you do not have to do anything. Like that's where you go and you get babies. So when you're ready to have a kid, you go and you get one from there. Of which, if that was the case, then I'd probably be happy to tell her that children come from a point of pleasure. Like, okay, maybe the man's pleasure, but, she can have her pleasure as well. Although, then again, this wasn't a talk on pleasure. It was about child trafficking in one way or another. And I should probably get on to something that actually discusses some version of pleasure, which is this podcast, which I should have started by saying, welcome to Breaktime on Westside, your number one Breaktime podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who knows how to make babies for just zero cost, considering that all you need is 2 reproductive organs and some good semblance of sex. Like, y'all can be banging, and as long as you enjoy it, you'll get that kid. With cum or with pre-cum. Man's just has to nut inside. He's a man who once believed that bukkake was a Japanese form of martial arts. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. The show is Tweetstreet, the show where we take a deep dive into Twitter, pull up a couple of tweets, and break them down a little bit. Now, as usual, the drill is pretty simple. If you don't know the drill, then I'm gonna repeat it for you. If you know the drill, then you can sing it along with me because it almost sounds like a song. And it is quite simple. It's how you can get to push some ideas, some ideology, some statements made on Twitter that happen to end up somewhere, to the forefront, so we can break them down. And it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal Twitter handle, and I will take them from there and I will handle them accordingly. If it happens to be on Facebook or on IG and it was one of those screenshots, it was a screen grab, it ended up on a page or some shit, then you send it to @Breaktime on Westside on Facebook or @Breaktime on Westside on IG. The DMs are always open and I will take them from there and I will handle them accordingly. Now, I want to get into the tweets real quick, but before I get to that, I want to go back to the whole childbearing and getting a kid from somewhere story. Now, one option that I forgot to mention was actually having a surrogate get the kid for you, which is something that Priyanka Chopra and Nick Jonas did recently, and they welcomed a new baby actually a couple of days ago, Or at least that's when the story was released, which was a couple of days ago. And I don't know if it's just me, but I usually find it a bit tough when you think about the idea of someone having a kid on your behalf, because there's usually that bond that mother and child have, like because of the womb and everything, and you'd probably feel like someone would be a lot more pressed to want to keep the kid as opposed to giving it out. But then again, I guess, the power of the dollar is a lot more powerful than the power of blood, or at least that's how some people might see it. Because personally, I don't think that I'd agree to just give my seed out. I think to a certain degree, that's why things like, being a sperm donor or just selling my nut seems a bit hard for me to do sometimes. Although then again, this is something that, a couple of rich people have decided to do. And they've gotten surrogates to do it. And, those people are happy with, say, a bunch of money as opposed to keeping a kid because, children are expensive and shit. Although I'm not gonna lie, whenever I look at this couple, I don't know, it gives me Jada and Will vibes to a certain extent. I don't know. Nick Jonas is always propping up Priyanka and, he's always making her seem like this amazing woman, but it's not like Priyanka ever really does that much to, make Nick Jonas look like he's this amazing guy. But anyways, that's just me. That one aside, let us move it on to the tweets. And before I get into the main set of tweets, there's this one particular tweet that I received from more than one fan, and it was itching for me to discuss. It was a story that was on the Twitter page known as 6 Brown Chicks, and it was a particularly interesting story that ended up circulating around the gram and shit. And considering that it was from Twitter, I will use this to be the starting point as I get into all the other tweets. So on to our very first tweet of this episode. I'm pregnant. My boyfriend of 3 years doesn't want a baby. He's a physical trainer and said he loves me, but he has sex with clients after workouts and says it's just a form of exercise with no emotions and he gets paid. He says if I'm too insecure, I can go. Will the baby change him? So a couple of years back, there was a time when I was just scrolling online and ended up on some page. I was busy looking for some caption images with quotes and everything so that I could use for something. I can't even remember what it was for. But while I was busy scrolling through a couple of different pages, I stumbled onto this one which had an additional link. And the headline was, I think, 20 or I think it was 25 stories on women that chose to get pregnant so that they could keep their men or something of that sort. I can't even remember what it was. And I just decided to click on it out of curiosity. And the stories that I got from there, that shit was scary for me as a guy, because I'd read stories and you hear babes saying, oh, I've been with my man for 4 years and I really want to stay with him forever. I wouldn't want to see him with anyone else. And he doesn't know it, but I just removed my IUD and I want to make sure I get pregnant from him so that he stays. I've seen other ones where it's like, oh, we've been fighting, but I really love him and I wouldn't want him to leave. So I made sure I've been having sex with him, especially when I'm not on my safe day, so that we can get pregnant. I ended up reading 20 very similar to this, but more or less slightly different stories on this entire thing. And I'm not gonna lie, the more I read, the more scared I got, because at what point do you now decide as a babe, I want to keep this man and I want to turn him into a father so that he can remain? Plus, what tells you that he's gonna even be a good father in the first place? I find that shit extremely scary, and to a certain degree, I even feel like it's quite sad that there's so many kids that are out here that existed not because two people came together and decided, oh, I want to have a kid, or the both of them, went and had an accident and, this baby was formed, but because one woman decided, or, a couple of babes decided, what, I want to keep this man, or I want to be with this man, so I'm going to make sure I take his seed, I turn it into a kid, and he chooses to stay because he's a good, caring person, and he'd probably make a great father. That shit scares me to the core to a certain degree. But anyways, let me go back to the tweet and just break it down. From the boyfriend's end, honestly, I feel like if you're going to be doing such a thing, if you're in a profession that's putting you in such a situation, especially after I watched a video on porn stars talking about their relationships and shit, it's better to inform your partner beforehand so that you guys can make a conscious decision together. Because it's only cheating if your partner either knows about it and doesn't condone it, or doesn't know about it and doesn't condone it. If they're okay with it, then it stops becoming a case of cheating and it becomes a case of a polyamorous relationship, or just, an open relationship. And if they're okay with that, then there's no problem. But now, like, this guy clearly decided, you know what, I'm gonna start fucking my clients because, it gets me more money and shit, and he didn't inform his babe, which I think is a very, very toxic, trait to have as a guy. Then on top of that, now there's this babe. You think that you are going to have this man stay with you because you're pregnant. You think he's going to stop what he's doing because you're pregnant and because he's going to be a father. Like, what makes you so sure of that? Like I've said on multiple episodes before, just because he makes a good boyfriend, just because he makes a good husband, does not mean that he will make a good father. Like, that shit has been experienced time and time again. And there's so many kids that have gone through trauma, and there's so many adults that have gone through such shit, and they will probably even tell you that for free. Just because they make a good boyfriend or husband does not mean that they will make a good father. Now, if you think the baby will change him, then I think you're stupidly wrong. There's a chance it might, but there's a very, very high chance it might not. Hell, the guy might even walk out, and he might even skimp up on shit like child support. So if you think the possibility of him becoming a father, despite the repeated talks and him saying that he doesn't want a baby, is going to change him, then I think you're probably dumber than he is, and you're probably just as toxic as he is. So in one way or another, I am sorry to say, but the both of y'all deserve each other, because clearly the both of you fucks are being too bloody toxic. Anyways, I don't want to lose my shits on this entire thing, so I will move it on. So on to our very next tweet. It's getting weird. I'm Gen X, and I have a huge problem with how I am left carrying the weight for millennials. For example, I'm 42 and my daughter is 22. She decided a while ago she does not want any kids. She is actually getting a procedure for sterilization next year. But those souls needing to come into our family for ancestral or karmic reasons still need to be born. So I'm stuck birthing and raising two babies who should have been born to her but can't because she's too selfish to have kids. We joke about how my 1.5-year-old girl, her sibling, is actually hers, but she just didn't want to have it. But deep down, it's not a joke. If she wasn't so selfish, I wouldn't have a toddler daughter right now. As in, I thought that I was getting done with the toxic bits with that first tweet. Now I'm stumbling upon this shit that ended up being sent from Facebook and then being posted up on Twitter as well. Fuck. Okay. Alright. Now, it's a very unfortunate case that we hear of right now where you hear more and more people saying that they do not want kids. Now, if you're someone that's a bit more cultural, if you're someone that still believes in the ways of the old, then you know that kids are sort of like a must. And you will believe that your kids have to get other kids. And, some of these people that believe in this are even against the idea of you getting a kid via adoption. So it's either you're going to produce your own kids or, you produce your own kids. Like, it's not one nor the other. It's pretty much the same exact thing. So you find that a lot of people that feel differently to this usually get to loggerheads with such people because they're like, why can't I have a choice? And I'm going to speak for the people that believe in the more traditional ways and just say, considering the fact that we're animals and all animals pretty much, follow the path of nature, where it's like you're born, you grow, and at some point in your prime you reproduce so that the next generation can have stronger genetics and, be able to tackle challenges a lot better. Like, we're the only subspecies or species that comes from like the animal kingdom that decides, we're not going to have kids. We're the only animal species that decides, we're not going to have kids, not because of circumstance, but because we simply just don't want to have kids. Which I think is very interesting. We are also the most intelligent species of animals that exists, And maybe dogs, maybe cows, maybe lions don't want to have kids, but they just do it because nature instructs them to. But that said, on the other side of the table, I do think that there is something to be said. I think there's some people that genuinely don't want kids because they do not like the idea of it, or they just know very well that they're not well equipped to be parents. Not in a bad way, they just know that they won't have the mindset to be good parents, which I think is a much more conscious decision than just having kids without thinking about it and then skimping on that role, which, if anything, you are not supposed to skimp on. Like, you're not trying to be a good mother, you're pretty much just existing and your kid is just there. Like, I think that one's a lot worse than someone who decides, let me just not have kids at all. So in one way or another, I can kind of understand where both sides are at. And I do think that one is being toxic. The toxic person is Madam Gen X, who is already having kids on the daughter's behalf. If that's what you want to do to continue your family's legacy, then you go do you. But I think deep down, it is still your daughter's choice whether she should have kids or she shouldn't have kids. And you trying to take over that decision for yourself is selfish in and of itself, and a little bit toxic. But anyways, that said, let us move it on. So on to our very next tweet. The women who have fallen for the lies of liberal feminism and hookup culture have pretty much ruined the dating pool for those of us who want legitimate monogamous relationships and commitment. Okay. Now, if I was reading this, or if I was discussing this maybe a year and a half ago, or should I say like even just a year ago, I probably would agree with this completely and talk about how feminism has messed blah 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 and blah 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 up. And well, to a certain degree, you can't say that this is actually true, because when you think about it, liberal feminism came a lot with the discovery of the pill, which actually did sort of give women the option of not just having sex procreationally, but also recreationally. And when you kind of think about it, that did kind of spike up the idea of, I can have sex and not really worry about getting a kid, so I don't really have to think about marrying this guy or being with this guy long term. Yes, which to a pretty huge degree might have been the one to spark up hookup culture. Although then again, hookup culture is mostly sparked up by the idea that I can sleep with this person and leave and go sleep with someone else. Like the fact that we can just come together and we can fuck and we can move the hell on without really having to develop some sort of a special bond or waiting until we're married. Now, can I blame that entirely on feminism? Not necessarily. Because I do think, and I know for a fact, that guys actually did also contribute to this in a major way. And when you think about it, guys actually are a pretty big part of the reason why hookup culture exists, because guys are the ones that are most notoriously known for wanting to fuck this person and move on. And moving on will include them going and banging someone else the following night or the following week or the following month. Like, it's something that's two-way. Like, guys do it just as much as babes do, although I will say that yes, the pill and a lot of liberal feminism, more so the idea of sexual liberation of women, has actually accelerated this and pushed it a lot more than it probably should. Which does kind of mention how there's some people that put themselves in the whole phase, yet they're not exactly built for it. But that said, if anything, the plus side to it is it actually leaves the people that choose to have good, long-lasting monogamous relationships to actually do that because they choose to. It's not because they have to. It just means that now they can choose to do it out of their own will. And yes, I know hookup culture seems a lot more fun than being in a monogamous relationship is, but fortunately the internet now at least is trying to balance it out with a lot of couples becoming very interesting content creators. But anyways, that said, I will leave it at that and move it on to our very last tweet of this episode. The idea that there are quote-unquote real men out there is icky to me. Men are men. There are no imaginary men or fake men. Just do better as a collective so you don't have to fight for your life creating terms that mean nothing. This one's actually pretty interesting to me. Like the whole idea of, men are men, there's no real men, there's no fake men. Like I can get where she's trying to make a point with all of this, but I can actually justify why such categories exist, because when you actually look at it, we haven't had a lot of cultural upbringing. At least a lot of us in the modern era right now don't have a lot of the cultural upbringing where we're taught on how to act as men, how we're supposed to behave as men. So a lot of us end up picking up what is supposed to be a real man, or what makes a good man, or what makes this kind of man from, the forces that are around us. So whether it's environmental, whether it's what we watch, what we hear, who we listen to, and so on and so forth, we will pick up one thing or another. Now, obviously, whenever you'll hear people talking about, real men this, real men that, it's essentially what the man is supposed to do, what the man is supposed to be. But the truth of it is that in and of itself is never the same across the board. Yes, there are some things that will remain. So, things like being respectful, things like being resourceful and shit like that. Like there's a couple of things that will be standard across the board, but a lot of times things will shift, which is why you'll hear a lot of women will be making statements like, real men do this, real men do that. Just the same way us guys will say real women do this, real women do that, because we expect a certain kind of caliber of people that we refer to as real, because the rest who do not match up to it and try to call themselves men sort of besmirch the name and the ideal of what it is to be a man. And of course, what we will do to counteract that is say that is not a real man, that is a boy, or that is not an alpha male, that is a beta. Like, that's where these categories will come from. And because we do not have a fully set line where what makes a real man, what doesn't make a real man exist, and we are left trying to show what a real man is supposed to do, what an alpha male is supposed to do, we will be left continuously trying to show what separates the wheat from the chaff. That's why we will continue saying that there's boys and then there's men. There's real men and then there's fake men. And, there's alpha males and then there's betas or there's sigmas. Like, we'll have those categories just because we want to show what the best version of what a man is supposed to be, or what the ideal of an alpha, of a man is supposed to be, kind of be there, so that it doesn't get corrupted by a lot of these other examples of people who aren't living up to that particular standard or ideal. Although, then again, maybe men are men. And maybe the only thing that makes men, besides things like circumcision, is the fact that they cross the age of 18 years. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about it. So I want your thoughts on this. The DMs are open on Twitter. It is at BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal Twitter handle. On Facebook and on Instagram, it is at Breaktime on Westside. The DMs are always open there as well. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end. And if you are listening through Castbox, feel free to drop your thoughts and comments below, and I will attend to them accordingly. Plus, if you are using an app that allows for ratings and or reviews, please feel free to drop a rating and or review. I will highly appreciate it. And I will catch you guys on the next break.